Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me on the Slice of Healthcare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Taylor. Joining me today is the co-founder and CEO at the holding company, Patrice Martin. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Jared.
I'm so excited to have you here. Let's dive right in. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll talk about what you're building.
Awesome. Like I said, it's such a privilege to be here. So, I'm Patrice Martin, CEO and co founder of The Holding Co., and we are a design and innovation lab focused on caregiving. And what that means is that we work with organizations to get better solutions into the hands of families around the full spectrum of care. So, that is caring for kids, caring for the aging, caring for those with illness, chronic issues, also the work of family life. And our work as an organization is really to bring more attention to the opportunity to recenter how we think about care and caregiving and build everything that we need to actually make care work in this country so that we all have the time, space, and joy that we deserve.
And this might sound like an obvious question, right? But I still feel like a lot of people don't fully get this piece. What is a caregiver? Who is the caregiver? And I know that can differ across lots of different things, but let's dive into that some more.
Yeah, it's actually a great question, and it's one of the issues in caregiving is like we're like it's rare to meet somebody who's not either being cared for or is a caregiver themselves, but it's not a word that many of us identify with, even though it's just kind of like the air we breathe and how our life is organized. So I personally had that same experience. So my journey into caregiving is I had the opportunity to collaborate with Pivotal Ventures, the investment and incubation company by Melinda French Gates, as they were looking at how to build a strategy around caregiving. Really, from the thesis that so much of this work is carried on women's shoulders. It's underpaid, it's undervalued work, it's work that hasn't been considered, and it holds us all back from women's true participation in society and in the workforce and in the economy. And so what might we do about thinking about moving the needle on what do we do about all of this work that isn't valued and isn't recognized? So I'm a designer by background. Of a long career at IDEO, was also co-founder of IDEO.org, and got the chance to work with them to say, let's go out into people's homes and just understand what care actually looks like. It's something that's it's so embedded in our social norms and the way in which we live. Like, where is there opportunity for this to change? So in 2018, 2019 led a year-long exploration of just going out and talking to a whole host of families across every makeup and style and demographic and economic variance, and had just got to see like how care shows up in people's lives. And it's everything. It's how we care for our kids, it's how we care for older adults, it's also just the mundane stuff of like, how do we make sure mom gets her medication? How do I get dinner on the table? Like, where's childcare going to be covered? Like, who's going to take dad for a walk? Like, and it's the work that we've just assumed gets done, and we put that in large part on working families who are already like overwhelmed and have so little time and just can't get this all figured out. It's really an impossible task that we actually ask of caregivers, to be able to just make this all work. And that's something that was absolutely revealed to us in COVID, that we've never had a working care system. And it was, made quite plain that it's central to how we like how we all are successful in this country, and really tied to our economic model. And so it's an exciting time to say, like, let's then say, what do we do about this? How do we actually build the wide variety of solutions that we need to, give everybody what, the realities of just like living a good life, and like having the ability to put all these pieces together.
And when you look at like the relevance to healthcare and the place just within the health kind of structure, right? Caregiving plays such, you mean, you mentioned it when you were kind of giving us the overview of the caregiver, right? Plays such an important role, and it comes in many different shapes and sizes, right? It can be within the health system. There's the caregiving companies that already exist today. There's a family member that's providing the care for another family member. And I remember growing up, just grandparents too, as they would get older, they'd say, "You better take care of me." Like it's on the, as people are getting more elderly too, it's on their mind as well. Who's going to be taking care of me? Am I going to be eventually being, entering a facility of some sorts, right? So this is going through so many people's mind. There's the person that's receiving the care. There's the person that is helping out as well. And I think what you mentioned is so interesting, because caregiving is beyond actually providing care to that person. It's doing the little things like talking with them and taking them for a walk, and so super important. What like Let's talk about, why isn't caregiving better integrated into healthcare today? Why is that still an issue?
We've designed healthcare, solely like from the perspective of, let's think about the patient's experience, and then everything that we do as if it's like kind of single player mode. It's that individual, they're making the decisions, they're in charge of like how their care happens, how they heal, and that's just kind of a false setup, so 83% of family caregivers play a critical role in the health decisions, of their loved ones. This is not a single user experience; it's a multi-user experience. We just haven't actually been able to integrate, like, the fact that, like, you're taking a loved one in for their cancer treatment. Like, there's a wife, there's kids, there's multiple people who are not just like kind of doing the work to get somebody to and from a hospital or a doctor's visit, but they're navigating that healthcare system to find those doctor's appointments in the first place. They need the information around what's happening, and they're largely responsible for how that person heals at home. From obviously, like, dealing with things that are more like clinical in nature, to medications, and the way in which bandages are applied, to just ensuring that person like gets to listen to music, or is in a clean bed at night. And in doing so, we've left the condition for this to be just filled with giant like workarounds around how we actually put on the caregiver their ability to sort of navigate these systems on the sidelines, when they're actually central to how that health in those health outcomes. And that's a huge flaw in the way in which our healthcare systems are designed and organized. And it actually creates so much opportunity for us to rethink that experience, and what would it mean to centrally engage caregivers, not just from the point of ease around their experience, but because they like truly contribute to like how effective and efficient we can provide care in this country.
You just said the magic word, opportunity. So I know, I love what you're doing. You are able to, help address this opportunity in multiple ways. What would you say the opportunity is? And I know that's probably not a one size fits all answer, right? But what's the opportunity that you truly see here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you're right in saying there's many opportunities, and that's what's exciting about this. But I mentioned before, like, what if a loved one taking someone special into their life for to a healthcare environment for a cancer treatment. What if that person was engaged in as essentially in this experience as the patient themselves? What if they had resources, tools, support? We also know that caregivers, like, it's a big mental health crisis. We're facing a mental health crisis in this country anyway. It's more extreme in the context of caregiving, which is often lonely, unrecognized work, filled with responsibility that we don't see. So what would it look like to support that person? And then what would it look like to support that person when they take the patient home, right? Like the tools, the services, the supports, even the compensation, to say, like, we value your work and your role, and we see you as an integral part of this healthcare delivery. Like, there's so much conversation around the what's going to happen with health in the home, and as we predict, so many of the services that are now happening in a hospital are actually going to be happening in someone's home over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's an opportunity to, instead of doing what we've done in the past, which is ignore and not include the caregiver, to actually design for them intentionally around this experience, which is better for everybody. It should create more effective healthcare delivery, also like better patient outcomes, and we then have a line of sight into what that caregiver experiences, which is one of the challenges right now. Even if we want to include a caregiver, we don't have the systems, we don't have the regulatory permissions to do so, and everything becomes hard and challenging. And I think that's a really exciting space as we kind of step into this new territory. How do we do that with intention?
What's next for the holding company that's really exciting you? I mean, there's probably a ton of stuff, right? But if you had to focus in, what's next?
Like, so many things. I mean, we want to work across the full portfolio of care solutions. So yes, we look at the intersection of caregiving and health, but we also look at, how do we just improve family management? How do we look at the context of childcare? Like, there's so many places where we can turn on. So we go deep with startups, we go deep with corporations into building out new offers. We also put out reports around the Investor's Guide to the Care Economy, the Entrepreneur's Guide to the Care Economy. We curate a list called the Care Guild, where we're just constantly highlighting the people who are doing this work to reimagine a modern care system. And so when I think of the future of the holding co, it's just like it feels like we just got started. Like, we've been at it for over 3 years, but there's so many more people that we want to work with, and so much more to build.
Well, I'm glad that we were able to connect here today, Patrice, and hopefully we can stay in touch and have you come back on in the near future and dive more into this topic. But really appreciate what you're building. Congrats on everything so far, and excited to stay in touch with you.
Thanks so much for having me. I'd love that.